Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kentucky Small Business Development Center's weekly webinar. We're glad you're here today. As we allow attendees a few moments to join our event, we'd like to share some information about the Kentucky Small Business Development Center. As the only statewide, nationally accredited program that provides entrepreneurial and business development services, the Kentucky Small Business Development Center plays a vital role in the Commonwealth's economic development by assisting entrepreneurs at every stage of their business life cycle. For almost 40 years, the Kentucky Small Business Development Center has assisted emerging and growing businesses by providing the professional expertise, tools, and information necessary to make sound business decisions in a complex and ever-changing marketplace. We do this at no cost to our clients, thanks to the U.S. Small Business Administration, who co-sponsors our program, which is then administered by the University of Kentucky, who partners with regional universities, colleges, and local economic development agencies. We're part of a national network also, America's SBDC, with over 1,000 centers across the nation. To learn more, visit kybizhelp.com. There you'll find additional resources to help start, fund, and grow your business. Also, to request personal assistance, email us at info@kybizhelp.com or call 1-888-475-7232. Just a little housekeeping. Today, later on this afternoon, you'll get a recording email with the recording of today's webinar, along with the slides and any other materials. And if you look to the right of your screen, you'll see the chat feature. If you have any questions, just go ahead and post them there, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and please try that chat feature out by saying hello and telling us where you're from. I see Regina jumped on right away. How are you? So it's a great day here in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm Dave Etkin. I'm the director here in Louisville. Today we've got a great guest. I was telling Ryan earlier that it took me like 6 months to reach out to these guys because I've been such a fan. It's almost like, you know, if I was to send an email to Beyonce to ask to go to the prom or something, I was just afraid to do it. But I did, and they responded back, so I was so happy for that. So today we have a great guest. Tamron Mock with On Strategy, one of the top strategic planning companies in the United States. Their resources are just fabulous. I can't say anything bad about these guys. These people are the thought leaders of the strategic planning world. And as we've kind of been doing some strategic planning sessions here in late December and early January, and I think having them to kind of cap that off was just awesome. So welcome, Tamron. I'm so glad to see you, and I'm glad that you were able to carve out some time of your busy schedule and come today.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to be here today.
Awesome. So I'm just going to fire you up, and let's just not waste any more time with the chit chat, and let's just dig right into it. How about that?
That sounds great. Let's get to it. Okay, well, thank you all for being here today. We are going to be talking about best practices in strategic planning, some common pitfalls, and we're going to go a little bit through the planning process, kind of a high-level overview. I do have more information. Strategic planning is something that I could talk about for the entire day, and we can only cover so much today. So we're going to be doing an overview, and then I am going to refer you to a few handouts that we have, and also our free resource section on our On Strategy website that will be great in follow-up if you want to embark on a strategic planning process. So just a little overview of our agenda today. We're going to be talking mostly about why does planning matter, an overview, what is strategy as opposed to just your everyday business operations. And then we're going to go through a high-level overview, like I mentioned, of what should actually be happening in your planning process and the different pieces of your planning process. So what's not on this agenda that's important to call out would be competitive advantages, strategic issues, competitive analysis, growth strategy, all very important parts of the strategic planning process. But just there's simply not enough time. So this is our high level, what we're going to be covering today. As Dave mentioned, my name is Cameron Mock. I'm a strategist at On Strategy. We work with a variety of clients, everything from government to nonprofit organizations to for-profits, corporations, small businesses, and everything in between. So we are fully adept to answer any questions that you might have moving forward if you're interested in moving forward with a planning process. Okay, so starting with our fundamental question of why does strategic planning matter? So we're going to talk about the 4 core practice areas, and we're going to spend a little bit of time going in depth to each of these. But strategic planning truly is the roadmap or the guide that allows your organization to achieve a desired future state. That's why we do strategic planning. It creates guardrails for our organization, keeps us focused on the future, and helps us achieve our future state, our future growth, where we want to be in 3, 5, 10 years. So a little bit on what is strategy. So strategy is about change, and it's really about creating a shift in your organization or a full transformation, really. But it's about changing the way that we're doing things today. So strategy is an articulated plan starting with your foundation of your mission, vision, values. It's creating strategic differentiation with your market data, using the data that you have, and potentially collecting new data. It's about engaging the entire organization so everyone knows what their piece of the plan is and how they contribute to the overall success of the organization. And it's about this transformation. So we're talking, we're communicating, we're discussing our performance on at least quarterly, if not monthly, or potentially weekly basis. And it's about assessing our current situation to understand both what's happening internally as our company or our organization, and also externally, the factors that are affecting our business in the marketplace. So some of our benefits, this is just a little bit of a grounding slide. I mentioned these 4 core practice areas, and these are what we at On Strategy feel are the core of strategic planning. So some organizations are ahead in some of these areas and some are behind in others. Sometimes our work is on every single practice area. Sometimes it's solely focused on 1 or 2. So creating that clarity that we spoke about so that everyone in the organization knows where we're headed and how they contribute. Creating focus so that everyone in the organization knows what they need to achieve and work on in order to achieve our future state. Creating alignment so everyone knows how they fit into the plan. And then lastly, this idea of creating confidence. So people are excited and they feel like they are contributing to the strategic plan and to the growth of the business. So my next slide is a fun little graphic. And this is just something we like to touch on. If we were at point A, that's where we are today. And point B is our future state. That's our big, hairy, audacious goal. Maybe it's our revenue goal or our client goal or wherever we want to be in 5 or 10 years. If you don't have a strategy, if you don't have your future state defined, you haven't put a pen to paper on what that point B is, you're going to end up along this bottom line, the squiggly line at the bottom that's just, you don't really achieve anything. You have some wins and you have some successes, but you never really achieve what you set out to achieve because you never articulated it. And then our top line that's going a little crazy with the loop-de-loops, that top line is if you have your future state articulated and the whole organization knows where you're going, but you don't really define how you're going to get there. So you're going to end up spending time on things that don't matter. You're going to end up having some highs and lows. You're going to go off the rails in some areas and then get reeled back in. And maybe someday you will achieve your future state, but it's going to take a long time and it's going to be a painful process. And then our perfectly straight arrow here in the middle is when we have a strategic plan in place, that future state's defined, and we clearly know the steps that we are going to take to get there. It's the path of least resistance, and it's the easiest way to get there. So that is what we're aiming for when we embark on a strategic planning process. Now, as a leader in your organization, you will be who's championing your strategic planning process. And what's really important as the CEO or the head of your organization is communicating these points continually. These are the key points that set leaders apart, that give your employees, they feel a stake in what's happening with your strategic plan, and they feel confident that they're able to execute. Now, talking about strategic versus business as usual, we often get the question of how do I know that what I'm working on is actually strategy? And these are kind of our guidelines for strategic versus business as usual. So your business as usual is your current operating your model. It's your day job. It's what you do every day, every week. It's just the non-negotiable role that you have in the organization. It's what we call the whirlwind with your day-to-day business. It takes up about 80% of your time. And then it's also measured in these hard quantitative metrics. So if you are in charge of HR, perhaps one of your KPIs that you as an HR manager would be measured on would be your employee turnover or your retention rate, which is a hard and fast metric. And that's just simply what you're in charge of every day. Now, if we're talking about what is strategic, it's things that are not in your current model. It's creating the future. So they might feel like they don't quite fit in. These projects might not fit in with your day job because it's outside of the whirlwind. It takes up 20% of your time. So you're not focusing on strategy all of the time, but it's peppered in. And it's usually measured in project type measures. So that would be, you have an initiative or an idea that to increase your retention, you want to implement tracking software, perhaps, or an employee engagement software. That would be strategic because it's something that is a project that will eventually lead to an increase in your hard quantitative metrics of retention rate or turnover. So that's the difference when we're talking about business as usual and strategic. And often what we see in strategic plans are that organizations write in their day-to-day and they write in their current job and they're too operational. But a strategic plan is not your business plan. It's talking about things that are outside of the norm, and it's not what you're doing every day. So that's kind of our litmus test for what is business as usual and what is strategic. Because if you start putting business as usual in your strategic plan, you're going to end up with a massive plan. It's going to feel painful, and it's going to feel a little bit too micromanagey. So we really want to make sure that we're only focusing on what is strategic. Now, these are our 8 planning best practices. I'll let you read over them, but just so that you know, the 2 that I'm really going to highlight today is this idea of point number 3, which is being simple, clear, and aligned. So making sure that we're all on the same page, we're speaking the same language. A goal is a goal, an initiative is an initiative, and we all understand the difference between those 2. And then making sure that we are moving forward in the same direction. And the last point there is about overbuilding your plan. And so that was my point that I made on the previous slide regarding the business as usual versus your strategic. You want to make sure that you are not overbuilding your plan. That is one of the biggest pitfalls that we're going to talk about on the next slide. And then the other point that I want to highlight is this point number 4. So strategic planning is creating a practice. And that's something that we really focus on it on strategy, creating that performance management process so that you don't just pick up planning once a year, make a bunch of goals, they sound really great, everyone's really excited about them, and then in a year you go to assess it and things have shifted, they've changed, and you forgot that you were supposed to complete one thing or another. But in creating that management practice so that it's really built in your organization's DNA, that we look at our performance on a monthly or a quarterly basis, and we're all aligned with where we should be going. And if something isn't going the way that we thought it should be, we're able to make a pivot off of that point. So it's about creating a practice and being very aligned. And of course, these other points are very important. And again, we will give you the more information on how to access our resource section to really look into each of these. But today we're really going to be talking about points 3 and 4. And then lastly, before we get into our overview of strategic planning, we're going to talk about these planning pitfalls for a moment. So these are the pitfalls that we've learned over years of building strategic plans. This bottom point here, the bottom 2 about not considering implementation and not reporting on progress or becoming a once-a-year event, those two go hand in hand. It's kind of what I discussed on the previous slide about creating a practice. Also, a few of these points kind of lend into each other. So creating an overwhelming plan or a meaningless plan that's mirrored in the day-to-day, that's when you start getting into an overwhelming plan or a plan that's not really strategic or doesn't mean anything to anyone. The other points that are really important to mention here would be the last 2, lack of empowerment and communication. So that comes directly from the CEO or the head of your organization or whoever is in charge of this planning process, your leadership team. You need to be able to empower your employees and have the communication so that they feel that they have a stake in the plan and they are excited about completing it. And that goes into that lack of ownership point or no accountability. Everyone in your organization should have a piece of the strategic plan. It should not belong simply in your leadership purview. Everyone should feel that they have a piece and that they're contributing in some way or another. And that's how you get that empowerment through that accountability and ownership piece. Okay, so now we're going to jump into our overview. This is where the rubber really meets the road here. So I'm going to go through everything quite quickly so that we have time for questions at the end. But again, we have tons of resources and some white papers for you all to use. So while this is just an overview, there's a ton more information that we can provide you about how to actually facilitate this in your organization. So I promise there's more to come. So briefly touching on our planning model. This is a great visual for what all is encased in our strategic plan. So first we start with our foundation, which is our mission statement. We talk about our core values. Your mission statement should be your statement of purpose, why you exist, and your core values should guide the decisions in your organization every day. And we'll touch on those in just a minute. But really, this foundation drives all of the strategic decisions that we make as we build out our underlying strategy. So over on this left-hand side, we have our current state. So that's where we are today. It's all of your existing data that you have, whether it's organizationally, internally, or in the marketplace. It has your past performance in it, your competitive analysis, your market summaries. All of this will lead us into our business strategy. So that top section is where to play and how to win. So it's defining our target segments. It's defining our competitive positioning. It's defining our strategy for how we're going to go after certain segments of the markets. Once we've got a laser focus on who we are actually going after, and all of that information is going to be fed out of that current state. So the current state is absolutely vital. It leads you into being able to identify with fidelity and with all of the possible data that you can gather what your business strategy should be. Which then leads us into our 3-year roadmap. Your roadmap is what is traditionally thought of as your strategic plan. It's really the bones of your plan. It's your priorities and your milestones, your goals, your team goals, your individual goals. We're not going to talk about OKRs today. However, OKRs are the new buzzy, exciting thing in planning. So there's a ton of information on our website that you can get about OKRs. They're a little bit different in methodology, but today we're just going to be focusing on our goals, initiatives, and the classic cascade model of a strategic plan. So just, putting that out there for a minute. So your roadmap will lead you into your future state, and your future state is your big, bold vision. It's your future outcomes. It's where we want to be in 3, 5, 10 years. And it's also all of those business health metrics. So your KPIs and those really quantitative measures of success. We'll know we're successful when we have 10 million in revenue or whatever it may be. And then lastly, at the base of all of this is your management system and your culture. So people don't usually think that strategic plans have anything to do with team culture, but really our plan will not be successful if we don't have a culture that's excited to experiment and that has the ability to try things and fail. So oftentimes our work actually starts with working on our culture, defining our core beliefs, values, and such, so that we can really, when we get into the implementation of our plan, people feel confident and comfortable to execute the plan. And the management system is that implementation piece. So it's our weekly or monthly or quarterly management cycle. It's the various methods of communication, and it's also how we're reporting on our results. So we've defined, if we send out a report every single Monday, we send out a report every single Monday, and we have the systems in place to facilitate that. So this slide is a little bit of a visual on what our planning structure is and our cascade. So in our previous slide, we talked about our roadmap for success and that 3-year plan. This is that portion of it. So everyone likes to use their own terminology, which is great, but as a generic, what we think is a best practice for your planning elements and definitions, at the top level of your plan are your strategic objectives. Those are your 3 to 5 year mini visions, we like to call them. They're big goals. They're typically not measurable. They're statements of intent, and they are, you'll know when you get there. They're typically owned by the CEO or the leader of the organization. The next level would be organizational goals. So you have 2 to 5 organizational goals for each of your strategic objectives. These are typically owned by the VPs, maybe the management team or the leadership team. Organizational goals should be 2 to 3 years in duration. They're typically measurable. So maybe this is where we would put our revenue goal or our retention rate goal. And then cascading from there would be our initiatives. So initiatives are typically those project-based measures. So those are the how we will achieve what we defined in our organizational goals. So initiatives are project-based. They are implementing a new software or conducting a new training or whatever it may be. And this is where it starts to go down deeper into your organization. Perhaps they're owned by your managers, perhaps they're owned by your assistant managers. This is where people really start to get a stake in the strategic plan. And they're typically about a year in duration. And then lastly, and this is kind of the optional level, but you can go down to the action item level. These would be owned by team members. So the bottom levels of your organization. They're typically quarterly or monthly. These are kind of our agile piece that we can adapt if needed throughout the quarter or throughout the month. They're typically fairly granular, but not so granular that it's dictating what people do in their everyday jobs. So the action items are still strategic in nature. They're still that outside of the whirlwind, and they are still not defining what people's day jobs are. Okay, so the elements of a strategic plan, this is what we kind of talked about already, but just defining what success looks like, why do we exist and how we behave, which is our foundation, how will we succeed, what's important right now, how we're measuring success, and who must do what. So this is just another view at the same point that we've been hitting over the past few minutes about what are the elements of a strategic plan. Okay, and now we are going to dive into our strategic foundation section. So talking about mission statements. A lot of people get very caught up in mission statements. They feel stressful and they feel like this very big, important thing, and they are very important. But really what they do at their core is defining our purpose, defining why our organization exists, and it defines what we do, which if you're in an organization and you're writing the mission statement, you already know all of this. So hopefully if you do a mission statement exercise, it shouldn't feel stressful and give you anxiety about defining your mission statement. You already have the pieces of the puzzle. It's just about putting them together. So here's a good guide. If you're stuck on a mission statement, the anatomy of a good mission statement is very simply stating our mission is, writing a verb in the present tense, defining your client and who you are in business for, defining your results or the benefit that your organization gives, and then lastly, stating what you do and potentially where you do it. So if you ever get very stuck on writing a mission statement, is this very simple formula is always a good go-to. But it's simply defining what mountain you're climbing, who you're climbing it for, and essentially just your core purpose. So in a few examples, typically I would ask for calling out if anybody has any idea of who these mission statements belong to. But I believe that there's a little bit of a delay in the audio, so I'm just going to spoil the surprise. This first one, to experience the sheer joy of advancing and applying technology for the benefit of the public, that is Sony. And perhaps you could tell just by reading it that while it is a little urethral and it's a little out there, you still know that it's a technology company that's benefiting the public, who they do it for. And then the last one, I think most people will know right off the bat, but inspiring the human nature, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time, and that is Starbucks. So those are two great examples of mission statements, and they do somewhat follow that guide that we talked about on the previous slide. And then lastly, in our mission statement, we like to reference Peter Drucker, who has a wonderful work on mission statements that we use quite often, but he would tell you that it needs to be short and memorable. Does it fit on a t-shirt? And would you and your employees want to wear it? Is it specific enough to distinguish the organization from all of the other competitors that you may have? And does it avoid cliches and vague words? So that is your checklist when you go forth to write a mission statement. Particularly, I think is important this last point of, is it short and memorable? And does it fit on a t-shirt? The t-shirt test is a great one to use. Next, we're going to talk about vision statements. So your mission statement is where you are and why you're doing what you're doing, and your vision statement is where you someday want to be. Often there's a little bit of confusion in the mission versus the vision, so hopefully we'll mitigate that in the next couple of slides. So your vision statement is defining where you're going. And you know, you may never reach your vision statement, and that's okay. And maybe you do reach your vision statement someday, and then you write a new one. But your vision statement is defining your desired future state, and it gives us direction as an organization where we're headed. So your vision statement should be audacious. It should represent a dream that is perhaps beyond what you think is possible. It should be motivating, so it should tell our organization which direction we need to move in. does it clarify our customer focus? Does it clarify our market position? It should be purpose driven, so it should give your organization a sense of what is our larger purpose. Perhaps it should be worded in a way that employees see themselves as building a cathedral as opposed to just laying stones, is a great metaphor that we use for vision statements. And it should be inspiring and capitalize on our unique competencies as an organization. So, talking about a few examples of vision statements, we love this first one, A World Without Breast Cancer. That is Susan G. Komen. It's simple. It's very bold. It inspires. People get excited about that cause. So that's a great vision statement. And the second one is to be Earth's most customer-centric company, to build a place where people can come to find and discover anything they may want to buy online. And that is Amazon, which I think that they have achieved that. And then talking about our checklist for evaluating your vision statement. So it's representing our preferred future of the organization, or the impact that you want our organization to have. So that was Susan G. Komen saying the impact of what they want to achieve is a world without breast cancer. It should be clear and compelling and easy to grasp. It should be somehow connected to your core purpose or your mission statement. So, if your mission statement is, not anything to do with breast cancer, your vision statement probably shouldn't be a world without breast cancer, for example. And it should be exciting to the broad base of people in your organization, and not just those who have the executive leadership roles and the responsibility, but everyone in your organization should be excited about your vision. So next, touching on our core values. This is the other foundational piece that lives with your mission statement. Core values are talking about how we'll behave. They will be the guardrails for how your company acts as you're acting out your strategic plan or executing your strategic plan. Something that's important to mention here, Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, often he says that people frequently confuse timeless core values with aspirations of what you'd like the organization to become in the future. So you should not be mixing future aspirations into your true and authentic core values. This will create justifiable cynicism and destroy the power of your core values. So your values should not be aspirational. They should be how we behave today. Your aspirational parts should involve or should be in your strategic plan, but core values are simply how you operate as an organization. And when we see core values fail, is when there's a disconnect between how the organization describes itself and how the organization actually behaves and operates. So an example, Zappos, their core values are to embrace and drive change, be humble, pursue learning and growth, and be passionate and determined. So we think that these are great core values. They also have a statement following them that clarifies them a little bit further, which is a great way to give a little bit more context into your core values. Your core values also dictate who you should be hiring in your organization. If you know that one of your organization's core values is to be humble, perhaps you wouldn't hire the candidate who comes off as a bit more of a braggart than you would prefer. And maybe that means that you wouldn't hire someone that's afraid to fail, or they're afraid to take on those big tasks because they know that they won't succeed. So your core values should be guiding how your company operates, and they are not aspirational in nature. They are truly how your company operates today. So next, we're going to touch on our SWOT assessment. I think that the SWOT is the most exciting part of the strategic planning process, which is funny because most people hear SWOT assessment and they just tune me out. But hear me out here. Your SWOT is a really, probably one of the most important parts of your strategic planning process. So let's talk really specifically for a moment. So we should be getting our SWOT data from everyone in our organization. It's not just the handful of the executive team. It's hearing from, what everyone from the top of your organization to everybody who's on the front line thinks are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is a great place to insert your lower level of your organization into the planning process so that they feel that they have a say and they get to influence the process a bit. And truly, it's a data-driven way of looking at your organization to assess what we should capitalize on, what we need to mitigate, and where we should be moving forward. So talking about our structure, our strengths are internal. So they're what we should be building on. Our weaknesses are also internal, so it's what we need to realistically shore up. Our opportunities are specifically external. So this is one place where we see SWOTs fall apart. Your opportunities should all be external opportunities that you could capitalize on to one day realize success in that opportunity. We see SWOTs fall apart when organizations start putting their opportunities as internal opportunities. If you must do that, you would want to really specifically call out in your SWOT with subheadings, these are our external opportunities, these are our internal opportunities. And then lastly, our threats are what we need to mitigate, and these are also external forces. So that could be in your operating environment, in the industry, in the market, from your competitors. So threats are your barriers that may prevent your desired achievement in the future. So some helpful data that you'd want to use for your SWOT for our internal portions on the strengths and weaknesses, your organization chart, any financial data that you may have, if you have any previous business plans or strategic plans or marketing or sales plans. And also your meeting structure is an interesting place to look for data in your strengths and weaknesses, particularly if you're talking about communication as one of those. And then your opportunities and threats would be, again, the same information, looking at your competitive analysis, looking at any external data, maybe it's marketplace data or articles or any reputable source that would give you external insights. And then some tips, just touching on these first three. So we want to use data wherever possible. It's great to get wisdom from the crowd. It's great to brainstorm, but really wherever possible, we want to be using actual data. So that's really important. I think a lot of people tend to sit down with their management team and do a SWOT, and you say, well, we have great communication, or we have great employees and our culture is wonderful. But until you actually look at the data and look at, say, your turnover rate or your retention rate, maybe that statement isn't actually true. So using data wherever you can is our first tip. And then these next two would be using adjectives and descriptive nouns, and also that your entries should lead to an action. So ask yourself when you're putting something in your SWOT, so what? If you don't have these descriptive entries into your SWOT, it's not going to be useful later in your planning process. And really where you should be getting your goals from when you're creating your strategic plan would be from that opportunities section or mitigating something that's in your threats section. So don't just put culture as a strength. You should be putting, our culture is defined because we have XYZ retention rate. Or for your opportunities, don't just state a market segment, state there's growth in this market because of this external force. And then that will lead you to the so what, as in how can we act on this? So those are some of our tips for a helpful SWOT. Just speaking briefly about the balanced scorecard, this is something I'm sure you all know, but when we start actually getting into the bread and butter of the plan, which is going to be our strategic objectives, goals, and initiatives, we want to be following this balanced scorecard framework. So we almost always, perhaps always, build our strategic plans following the balanced scorecard. It ensures that you have a well-rounded plan. This is everything that you need in every segment to house your goals. It creates buckets for us to organize. So first, talking about our financials, so revenue and expenses, these goals will probably be pretty quantitative and measurable. We want to talk about our customers and growth opportunities. That would be our second section. We want to talk about internal processes, so our operations, innovation, marketing, sales, and lastly, we want to talk about people and learning. So that would be hiring, HR, culture, so on and so forth. So with that balanced scorecard in mind, we can build our strategic objectives. So just touching on this slide one more time so that you can remember where we are in our cascade. This is the top level. When we're building our strategic objectives, we want to make sure that they're long-term, broad statements. You should have no more than 6. If you'll remember, as you start moving down in your strategic plan, it's a cascade, right? So if you have more than 6, when you get down to that 4th level, that action item level, you're going to end up with a massive plan that feels too heavy to execute. So no more than 6, anywhere from 3 to 6 would be a great place, but ideally that sweet spot would be 4, to have 1 in each section of the balanced scorecard. And questions that you'd want to ask when you're building your strategic objectives, these are the big rocks, they're your mini vision statements. So asking, what are our shareholders' expectations for financial performance or social outcomes? What's our value proposition? So to achieve this, what value do we need to provide to our customers? And what processes must we excel at to deliver on our products and services? So how do we actually deliver to our customers? Some examples of great strategic objectives, you'll see that these are not necessarily measurable. To establish a financially stable and profitable company, well, we can't really put a number on that or a measurement, but we'll know when we get there, which is the point of your strategic objectives. Now, in that same vein, you could also have measurable strategic objectives such as that third point, profitability, maintain margins at 20%. So it's a little bit how your organization wants to build their plan. If you'd rather be a little bit more dynamic in what you'd like to state, a little bit more vision-y, or if you'd like to be a little more specific, two different ways to skin the cat. In our customer and growth, so introducing current products to 2 new markets or increasing all of these items, so loyalty, customer satisfaction, and referral volume. And if you start thinking about our cascade, if you list 3 things that we're increasing at our strategic objective level, that would play quite nicely into our next level of the plan, which would be organizational goals. And you would have specifically a goal on loyalty, customer satisfaction, and referral volume. So you can see how this cascade kind of starts to play out. A few more examples for internal processes and people and strategic, be the best place to work in our industry and market. Great strategic objective for our people section. And again, you'll kind of know when you get there, spidey sense, you'll feel it. So next we're going to talk about our roadmap. So goals, initiatives, and targets. I'm going to give you an example first. This is what a good roadmap looks like. We have our perspectives, all 4 of them from the balanced scorecard. We have strategic objectives. These are not necessarily defined statements. They don't have to be, but they are getting a little bit more definitive in what we're doing in each of these perspectives. And then when we're talking about a roadmap, we're talking about specifically mapping out our performance measures. So these are going to be our KPIs. This is specifically what we're measuring in every single one of these strategic objectives. And, you know, typically you start with 3 years out. You'd say we want to be at XYZ place in 3 years. And then you move backwards and fill in the gaps of what you would need to achieve in the next year and within the next 2 years to achieve that 3-year target or goal. And in order to do this, you would want to develop an effort impact grid. So when you start talking about your goals and where you want to be and what you want to achieve in 3 years, you're going to take all of that information from your SWOT. And this is why I get excited about the SWOT. You're going to look at your SWOT analysis and look at everything that you put down on paper there. And you're going to start moving it into an effort impact grid. And this is how you're going to determine what your goals should be. So the point of an effort impact grid is to define a way to organize each of your opportunities or threats that you might want to mitigate in a simple way to assess where you should be focusing your efforts. Now, what you get from the effort impact grid will eventually be developed into a goal. So if we're moving items, you're going to be talking about if it's a low or high level of effort, and then if it's a low or high level of impact. And you can see in this grid, we want to be over here in this bottom right quadrant. So it's a high impact and a low effort. Absolutely, that will be in our strategic plan. If it's a high effort and a high impact, that's typically strategic. That's where most of your good goals are going to come from. The gems are quite rare. Low effort, low impact is something you can quickly do. It's a just do it. And then our carefully consider is in this low impact but high effort, probably not worth doing it, but maybe consider it in the future. So once we've organized every opportunity that we have, we move into creating goals. So I think you all know what SMART goals are. We're not going to spend a ton of time here. Your checklist should be, one thing very important is about this ownership and accountability piece. So people actually know who is responsible that are in SMART. So taking everything from your effort impact, developing it into a SMART goal. The next section is about identifying performance measures for your goals that you create. So if you have a goal that is not measurable by a hard quantitative outcome, you'd want to use a project measure such as a % complete. So that's measuring, you know, the process that the owner can influence. Everything else I think is fairly straightforward here. Obviously, you know how to measure a activity, whether it's number, currency, activities. So once you have your SMART goals, it's important to identify how you're measuring performance towards them. Obviously, if your SMART goal is to increase profitability by 20%, your measure would be % increase in profitability. But if it's something that's a little bit more squishy, you'd want to maybe use this project measure of % complete. And then lastly, some tips for your performance measures. You'd want to think about your impact, your data source. It should be something that you can report on monthly. You should be using a combination of leading and lagging indicators, and use a proxy or a qualitative measure if it's too hard to get quantitative data. So that's that % complete. Still something you can report on, but it's a little bit, has a little bit more wiggle room in it. So that's everything that you would need to develop your goals. Lastly, touching on KPIs and initiative planning. So KPIs, you should only have 5 to 7. These should be things that help you keep your pulse on your performance. You should be thinking about both the leading and the lagging. So how will we know that we are making progress? And what things do you need to monitor consistently? You should not have 25 key results that you are, or KPIs that you are monitoring on a monthly basis. That's way too much. Really identify the handful of things that will make an impact. Supporting initiatives. So these are the projects that cascade from your goals. Once you've defined those goals, you would define your KPIs and your supporting initiatives. So these are the how. So how are we going to achieve our goals? What must we achieve? How will we know that we achieve our goals? So these start getting a little bit more specific to individuals. They'll align with potentially your employees' individual performance plans. Perhaps their initiative, if they achieve it, is on their development plan. And that is where we're going to leave off. We're not going to talk about action items today, but we do have more information for you on our website. And really quickly, before we get to questions, and running a little bit late, but just speaking about implementation and performance management. This is a great quote: without execution, vision's just another word for hallucination. You will not achieve your strategic plan if you do not focus on the who will be performing it, the where the activities will be conducted, the when and how often, and how your activities will be carried out. So your strategic plan does the what and the why. You need to fill in everything else with your implementation plan. The 5 keys to implementation would be culture, people, resources, systems, and processes and structure. So specifically talking about those resources, yes, they can be monetary, but they're also talking about the time resources that your company has to devote to the strategic plan. It's also talking about buy-in as a resource. So if you have the culture that allows you to have the people buy-in, or whether you need to develop it, all 5 of these keys need to be present for you to implement successfully. This is Simon Sinek's golden circle. So your implementation is kind of this yellow line, right? You have your why, of your vision of why you're in your mission of why you're doing what you're doing, and getting to the what. You need to be communicating the vision. You need to be transparent, asking for input, getting your staff excited, and staying on the course. So that would be establishing personal investment and defining why everyone is important. The golden circle really tells us that everyone typically knows what they do, but most people, and maybe very few, know why we do it. So that why, if you really get your employees connected to the why, they're going to be more excited about conducting the what. So this is how you drive loyalty and belief in your organization, is really connecting what your employees are doing every day to the why of why they're actually doing it. And then in our rollout, some key things to remember here: repetition, simplicity, multiple mediums, and cascading messages. So cascading messages would be that your leadership communicates to your managers communicate to their direct reports, and so on and so forth. Repeating the same message so that we're all on the same page across multiple mediums in a simple fashion. And then lastly, setting a calendar. Hopefully you're managing your strategic performance on a monthly cadence. Perhaps it's quarterly, but you'll definitely want to be keeping to the schedule and setting a schedule so that we are very aware as an organization when we should be executing what by when. And then lastly, I have an example review agenda. We're not particularly going to go over this because I do want to leave some time for comments, but this is a great structure for when you're talking about results. And then lastly, a few tips and tricks. So we need to be ensuring that leadership's committed. We're acting in a coordinated action. Our focus should be 20% on what's in the past and 80% what we want to do in the future. Be simple, consistent, and ensure that you're celebrating success. And if you follow all of these tips and tricks, I very much believe that you can have a successful implementation process. We'll be providing some links for you, we'll be providing some white papers. They can all be found on our website as well. And lastly, this is our website. Kathleen Colombo is our engagement director. So if you're interested in reaching out to her, this is her information. And with 5 minutes left, I'm a little bit out of breath. Are there any questions that we can take in our last 5 minutes?
That was a fire hose of information, Cameron. That was awesome.
Oh yeah, I know it's a little overwhelming.
We do have some questions, but I'd like to ask a question first. I've come across examples where a leadership team wants to do strategic planning, but their biggest hurdle in doing it is like the CEO or the leader. I mean, is there any sense in even going through this exercise if you don't have buy-in from the top guy?
Well, that's a kind of a sad question, but really no. I think that the key to creating a strategic plan that everyone is involved in is there truly has to be buy-in, particularly at the top level of the organization, so that everyone is aligned in what they're creating. I have to say I've never run into an issue where a CEO doesn't want to create a strategic plan. So that one threw me for a loop a little bit, but I definitely have to have at least your entire executive team to have that buy-in to even begin being successful in a planning process.
Yeah, good. So Jim wants to know, Jim's my good friend. Hello, how are you? He asks, I guess this is kind of along the same lines, is there a good repair manual for when core values don't match and cynical translations have taken hold?
Mm-hmm. So we've done quite a few processes with core values and kind of instilling them in organizations when they don't feel aligned. And I think that one of the things that's important, and you can find more information about this on our website, but if you have a core value, there's also within that core value, there are beliefs and there are expectations for each core value. So if our core value is we're not afraid or we can fail and fail often, say, if there's a belief in the organization that actually we are not comfortable to fail, we know that there's going to be executive blowback or our manager is going to get upset at us, then our core value really is meaningless. So there is more information on our website about core values. I also think that Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, is an excellent reference for creating core values. So I would recommend that. Yeah, that's kind of a big question to answer in a few minutes. That's a little bit helpful.
Definitely. So here's another one from Holly. Holly wants to know, how do you approach a discussion with leadership team when the goals are aggressive and the team is not buying in?
Mm-hmm. I think, aggressive goals are great. We obviously want to be doing these stretch goals that we're not actually sure if we can achieve, but we hope that we do. And I think that one of the things to mention in your communication to the team is that we don't actually obviously want to 100% complete our strategic plan. We want to achieve every single goal, and we just want to be superstars in our execution. But one of the ways that you can get that team buy-in to these aggressive goals is that we should be communicating to our team that we want to achieve about 80% of the plan. We are fully aware that we will not hit every single target and everything's not going to go perfectly smoothly, and there will be hiccups. And I think that if you allow or if you give that communication that there is an allowance that while we understand this is aggressive, we know that there will not be full success in all of this. I think that that helps your team feel a little bit more comfortable in organization, and when they know that they're not going to be penalized if they don't succeed every single goal or succeed in every single goal.
Yeah. So here's a kind of a granular question. Earlier back when you were talking about the scorecard, leading indicators are hard to define. What are some other tips could you give to identify good leading indicators as opposed to, I guess what they're asking, as opposed to just the basic revenue type. Those are actually not leading indicators. But yeah.
So for defining leading indicators, I think that a good place to start is to look at your, if you're looking at sales or conversion as a lagging indicator, you could look at, your pipeline. So taking a step back from where not everyone has access to this data. So I fully respect that leading indicators are a little bit more difficult to track. But perhaps your leading indicators, if you really just take a step back from wherever you're starting with your lagging, perhaps it's website traffic is your leading indicator, or it's entering a marketing flow for a new customer. Kind of the leading indicators with the sales funnel are kind of the easiest to identify. So I'd have to give a little bit more thought to identifying other indicators. But, perhaps an employee engagement, it would be an employee satisfaction survey would be a leading indicator of your rate. So I think that, we do have a KPI white paper on our website that could probably give a little bit more information on that as well, but hopefully that's answers somewhat of the question.
Okay. And how important is dashboarding and being very transparent with the dashboard?
We love our dashboards at On Strategy. I definitely think that if you have a board, obviously your dashboard needs to be visible to them. We think that we actually believe that visibility is so important in facilitating the implementation of your strategic plan. We believe in full transparency. Now, some people are not comfortable with that in the organization. But if your staff and your employees really understand, why are we driving XYZ this hard? Well, it's because our overall goal of revenue or whatever it may be just isn't quite where it needs to be. I think it gives your employees a little bit more context for why they're doing what they're doing, which again is that connecting to the why. So, a lot of people are not comfortable with full transparency, but dashboards that provide as much clarity as you feel comfortable with should be visible to your staff or your employees whenever possible.
That leads into another question about dashboards and accountability. So if you have a dashboard or your plan has the action items, I mean, what exactly is this idea of accountability with a team like this? Could you talk a little bit about that?
The idea of accountability in the different levels?
Well, I mean, how do you manage your team to be accountable? I mean, do you, on your dashboard, would you?
I understand your question. So I think that one thing with accountability and how to drive that would be on your dashboard, there should be a name assigned to it. And we actually like to call our owners of items or goals or initiatives or whatever it may be, we actually have shifted towards calling them champions. So it doesn't feel like if that goal is not on track, they are solely responsible for it. However, they are the person that's going to be responsible for reporting on it and overall taking responsibility for that item. I also think with driving accountability, if we are conducting monthly or quarterly reviews, if someone knows that they have to get up and talk about the performance of something, they will definitely pay a little bit more attention to it because no one wants to stand up and look like they don't know what they're talking about. So I think that either having those monthly reviews where people speak to the progress drives accountability, and so does publishing reports. So kind of creating that practice around if we publish a report on the first of the month every single month and if someone's goals are not updated or they haven't been performing very well, I think it drives a little bit of accountability too because people have the visibility and there's the transparency so everyone sees who's performing how, and not in a punitive way, but it is a way to definitely get people kind of shaped up to manage what they're responsible for.
I mean, do you think that's kind of public shaming in a way? Is that, when you're publishing stuff like that?
No, well, hopefully, if you're embarking on a strategic planning process, hopefully you've got that culture, which is why that's kind of the underlying first piece, is hopefully you have that culture that people don't resist to the change, or they don't, feel like they want to blow off reporting on their goals. So hopefully it's not public shaming, because there's shame. But that's why really before getting into a strategic planning process, you need to have that buy-in, and you need to have that commitment from everyone in the organization that this is what we're doing and it's what we want to do. And there won't be resistance to the planning process. So we didn't touch much on culture aside from the core values, but that is just a whole other 4-hour conversation packed into 60 minutes.
Yeah, I really enjoy when you brought that up right at the beginning, because that is the key to success, is culture. And without that, you don't really have anything other than going through the motions on things. So
certainly, and that's one of the biggest pitfalls where we see plans fail, is people they don't even think about if they have the culture in place to implement a plan or build a plan.
Yeah. Well, Cameron, looks like that's all the questions I see here. This has been really great. This is more than I had hoped for. You've gotten a lot of great comments.
Awesome.
Yeah, Mary just said she's going to pass on all this great info to all levels of their management. So that's
awesome. Yeah, and we do have everything that's in the files that were sent. Plus, our website has, 15 years of resources on there. Everything from guides to videos. We're about to release a new video series. There is just so much information. It's astounding on our website in our resource section. So please use it. It's there. It's free. And that's really our goal, is to help organizations like you all. So take all of it, please.
Yeah. Like I said, I've used your resources for a long time. It's been awesome, and it's your founder, Erica Olson, is the genius, and hats off to everything you guys do. And I've been so happy that you were able to join us today. I hope you'll do it again, because I could talk about this all day.
I could, and I could go on and on and on, obviously.
So thanks, Cameron. We'll kind of wrap it up. I just want to kind of remind everybody, next week we'll have a great guest. Lyle Hawkins going to be talking about some moving your business forward in 2021. And also next Thursday at noon, just want to let you know that we have our great PPP experts, Erica and John from Dean Dorton CPAs. We'll be going over all the tips you need to know about getting your PPP loan set up. So please join us for that. We'll send everybody a link to jump on there. And so with that, we'll wrap it up. Cameron, thank you so much. Tell Erica I said hello. And everyone else, have a great Wednesday. And again, we'll send you the slides and a replay later on today. And we'll see you next week. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.